The first time Xia Qi met Xiao Ran was on an evening when the sky was painted with a glowing sunset. That day, the largest supermarket in the city center was packed with people. Middle-aged men and women filled their shopping baskets while chatting about their daily lives, carefully selecting their items. Shui, wearing a hat with cat ears and a pair of yellowed white sneakers, casually made her way to the snack aisle. The shelves were neatly lined with all kinds of snacks, and under the bright lights, her face appeared even fairer. She glanced around and, seeing no one nearby, swiftly grabbed a pack of candy. She tore open the packaging and dumped the small mints into her backpack. Her movements were quick, as if she'd done this many times before. In less than half a minute, she had already emptied 3 packs. Just as she reached for a 4th pack, a large hand suddenly stretched out from beside her and grabbed her. It was over. She'd been caught. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. She looked up and found herself staring into a pair of dark eyes. The man standing before her was strikingly handsome, his features sharp and defined. His hair was cut short, and he was so tall that Chui barely reached his chest. At that moment, he stood blocking the light, casting a shadow over her. "What are you doing?" He released his grip, his brows furrowed slightly, his expression serious. Chui's heart raced, but she kept her composure. She pursed her lips and replied, "Can't you see? I'm stealing." "Stealing?" Xiao Ran was taken aback. His frown deepened as he extended his hand. "Hand it over." "Here." "What bad luck," Chui grumbled, tossing the candy back into his hand. She turned to leave, muttering, "Busybody." "Wait." Xiao Ran blocked her path. "The ones in your bag, too." He glanced at her backpack. Chui's dark eyes flickered with thought, and soon they brimmed with tears. Suddenly, she grabbed Xiao Ran's sleeve, pleading pitifully, "Sir, I didn't mean to. Please don't make a big deal out of this. I'll give everything back, okay?" With that, she pulled off her backpack and handed it over. Xiao Ran took the bag and looked down at the young girl again. She was strikingly beautiful, her skin fair and her features delicate, though her cheeks still carried a bit of baby fat, giving her an innocent look. She was standing so close that a faint minty scent lingered in the air around her. Feeling a bit flustered, Xiao Ran steadied himself. "Come with me." He tugged at her hand, leading her towards the checkout counter. "Are you going to report me?" Chui's lips pressed into a thin line, her face darkening. "I didn't expect you to be so uptight, sir. I was just hungry, okay? I didn't mean to steal." Xiao Ran didn't look back, replying only, "Hungry, so you eat candy?" "I can eat what I want. You got a problem with that?" As they reached the counter, Xiao Ran unzipped the bag and dumped all the candy onto it. The line at checkout was long, and people turned to watch. The cashier hesitated for a moment. "Sir, what's this about?" Xiao Ran offered an apologetic smile. "Sorry about this. My little sister got carried away and opened all the packs. I'll pay double for them." After paying, Xiao Ran walked out of the supermarket with Chui trailing behind. The sky had turned darker, and the streetlights had already flickered on. Under the glow of the lights, Xiao Ran's shadow stretched long on the pavement. After walking a bit further, Xiao Ran finally stopped and handed the bag of candy to Chui. "Here, don't steal again." Chui stared at him for a few seconds before breaking into a smile. She stepped closer and teased, "Sir, why are you helping me? Is it because I'm pretty? How should I repay you?" Her fingers brushed against Xiao Ran's chest. "Should I offer myself to you?" Startled, Xiao Ran took a quick step back, his face turning serious. But under his short hair, his ears were noticeably red. "You should go home, kid." He turned and started walking away. Chui laughed loudly, calling after him, "Sir, are you sure you don't want to think it over?" In July, the weather was already scorching. A low-profile black van slowly pulled into the parking lot outside Fengshan Bar. Xiao Ran turned off the engine and spoke into his radio. "Team 1 in position." The Ning City Police Department had recently begun a large-scale crackdown on prostitution, and today marked the first operation. The radio crackled for a moment before a man's voice came through. All teams prepare. Operation begins in 5 minutes. Understood. A fellow officer in the van complained. Finally got a few days off, and now we're pulled into this bust. What a drag. Xiao Ran tossed him a baton. All right, enough. Get ready. The operation began. Police officers lurking in the shadows surged into action, quickly storming Fengshan Bar. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of alcohol, while figures intertwined on the couches in the dim corners. Nobody move, one officer shouted. The chaotic noise was instantly silenced, leaving only the music thumping from the speakers. Panic spread among the patrons. The couples who had been embracing quickly separated, and those using drugs scrambled in every direction, turning the scene into pure bedlam. Xiao Ran, a skilled criminal investigator, swiftly subdued a middle-aged man involved in drug trafficking with just a few moves. After handing the suspect over to another officer, he caught a glimpse of a familiar figure out of the corner of his eye. Xu Yi had only been working as a waitress at this bar for less than a week. When the police stormed in, she was startled and stood by the wall with the crowd, unsure of what to do. A female officer was checking the IDs of each person one by one. Miss, please show your identification. Xu Yi bit her lip and said softly, I forgot to bring it. With makeup enhancing her beauty, she looked even more captivating. Her wide, innocent eyes gave her a delicate and vulnerable appearance. The female officer frowned, her expression filled with disdain. Speak properly, then give me your ID number. Sis, don't make this difficult for me. I didn't do anything illegal. You. At that moment, a voice interrupted the female officer. I'll handle this. Officer Xiao. Xiao Ran smiled slightly. I'll take care of things here. Go assist the others. All right. Xu Yi blinked at him curiously. Uncle, so you're a cop, huh? How about letting me off the hook, okay? She leaned in, clinging to his arm as she playfully pleaded. Xiao Ren awkwardly pulled away, his cheeks flushing. But then, remembering that she was barely older than his cousin, a young girl who had already been caught stealing and was now working in such a seedy place, his tone grew stern, the way it did when he scolded his younger relatives. You're just a young girl. How can you act so carelessly? Xu Yi froze, releasing his arm, and a mocking smile appeared on her face. Uncle, what I do is none of your business. Just because you're a cop doesn't mean you can control everything. She stepped back, leaning against the wall, her tone casual and indifferent. No one is born a thief, and no one is born to degrade themselves. Fengshan Bar was notorious in Ning City as a haven for gambling, drugs, and prostitution. The raid was successful, with many individuals arrested. Xu Yi, lacking proper identification, was also taken back to the police station. In the brightly lit office, Xiao Ran sat across from Xu Yi, conducting the routine questioning. Name: Xia Chu Yi. A nearby officer couldn't help but snicker, thinking to himself, what kind of parents would give their kids such a funny name? Xiao Ren shot him a disapproving look, and the officer coughed awkwardly. I'll, check on something over there. Age. Xiao Ran continued. 18. Don't lie. How old are you really? Xu Yi glared at him, tears quickly welling up in her eyes. Yes. I love lying. I'm a thief. I work in a bar, and I know you look down on me. Tears streamed down her face like a broken string of pearls. Xiao Ran froze, panicking slightly. He had never made a girl cry before. Hey, don't cry. I didn't mean it like that. Please don't take it to heart. Xu Yi shot him a tearful glance. Really? Really? I don't look down on you. He scratched his head, utterly clueless on how to comfort her, so he awkwardly handed her a tissue. Please stop crying. Then tell me your name. Xiao Ran. Xu Yi immediately wiped away her tears, a smile curling at her lips, her sadness vanishing in an instant. Ah, so you're Uncle Xiao. Xiao Ran was speechless. By the time Chenrong arrived at the station, Xiaoran still hadn't managed to get Chu Yi to reveal her real age. Most of the other detainees had already been released, except for a few whose cases were more serious. Chenrong hurried in, wearing a dark brown t-shirt, and upon seeing Chu Yi, rushed over. What happened? What did she do? Chu Yi stiffened, lowering her gaze. It's nothing. Xiaoran stood up. And you are? Officer, hello. I'm Chu Yi's father. My daughter didn't get into serious trouble, did she? Is your daughter still a minor? Do you know she's working at Fengshan? I know. Chenrong appeared uneasy, rubbing his hands nervously. Fengshan Bar is no place for a girl her age. You should be more responsible. Xiaoran's face darkened. Go over there and sign the paperwork. And she won't be returning to Fengshan. Chenrong nodded repeatedly and turned to take care of the formalities. Xiaoran looked down to see Chu Yi staring up at him, her big, bright eyes sparkling, a smile still playing on her lips. Why are you so happy? Of course, I'm happy you scolded him. That man is awful. He always mistreats me. She said it in such an exaggerated, playful tone that Xiaoran couldn't help but shake his head in exasperation, thinking how much more difficult she was compared to his own feisty cousin. Enough nonsense. Go home with your father and get some rest. He pulled out a small cake from the drawer, something he had originally prepared for his cousin, and handed it to her. You must be hungry after all this. Here, take this. It was a delicately packaged cake, the pink box adorned with beautiful floral designs. Chu Yi's heart unexpectedly softened. Thank you. From the front of the office, Chenrong's voice called out, signaling that the paperwork was done and it was time to leave. Chu Yi picked up the cake, hesitated for a moment, then leaned down towards Xiaoran. Uncle Xiao, I'll be an adult in just 1 month. Will you like me then? It's okay if you don't, because I like you, and that's enough. She pulled out a mint candy and pressed it into Xiaoran's hand. Just a little gift in return. Xiaoran blushed, staring at the candy, then chuckled and shook his head. Do you really like mint candy that much? Chu Yi replied, because it tastes like happiness. It was already late when Chu Yi stepped out of the police station, the night sky pitch black. Following Chenrong back to their small apartment, which reeked of smoke and alcohol, she stumbled over scattered beer bottles as soon as they entered. The door slammed shut behind her, and her heart sank with the sound. Sure enough, in the next moment, rough hands gripped her waist and threw her to the ground. The cake she had been holding flew off, splattering creamy frosting everywhere. The sound of crushed cans echoed as she bit her lip defiantly, looking up at Chenrong. He had lost the semblance of the obedient man from the station, his ordinary face twisted with rage as he pulled off his belt, yelling, I told you to earn money. How come you got caught by the police in just a few days? Are you trying to drive me crazy? The belt sliced through the air, striking her delicate skin, leaving red welts that soon oozed blood. She curled up tightly, every part of her aching, but she refused to cry out. You ungrateful little brat. I feed you and give you a roof over your head, and all you do is cause me trouble. After exhausting himself with the beating, he discarded the belt and flipped her over, pinning her down. He yanked at her collar, tearing her shirt apart, his breath heavy with the stench of alcohol as he leaned in. Just like your mother, useless. At least you've got some looks. Otherwise, I'd be losing out. A crescent moon hung high in the night sky. Chenrong was passed out beside her, the room heavy with the aftermath of indulgence. Chu Yi put on a coat and stepped outside. The living room was a mess, with bottles and cigarette butts strewn across the floor. Her gaze fell on the beautiful cake, now a shattered wreck. Dragging her exhausted body over, she knelt before the remnants, pressing the packaging to her chest. Chu Yi's nightmare began one winter when she was 14, when her father died in a car accident, shattering their once happy home. That day, it snowed heavily. The road outside the village was soaked in blood, and her father lay there, surrounded by scattered mint candies, treats he had promised to buy her. From that day on, All she remembered was her mother's endless suffering. To provide for her, her mother married Chenrong. At first, things seemed fine, but Chen's gambling and drinking spiraled out of control, leading to violence against her mother until her death. Then Chu Yi became the target of Chenrong's abuse. Her body bore countless scars, and she was repeatedly violated by those disgusting hands. Would this nightmare only end with death? Crouching by the table, she felt lost in memories of happier times. Her father was alive, loving, always lifting her onto his lap and offering her mint candies, saying, "My little princess, have you been good today?" She closed her eyes, pain radiating through her body, yet no tears came. Her throat felt painfully dry. Trembling, she pulled out a mint candy and placed it in her mouth. The cool, sweet flavor spread through her, seemingly washing away all the bitterness. Chenrong's torment made it hard to remember those blissful moments. She could barely recall her father's face, only the taste of mint lingering in her memory, a taste of happiness. The next evening, Chu Yi stood at the police station's entrance, wearing a long-sleeved shirt that covered her collar and arms. The police station had been relatively quiet lately, and Xiaoran had been getting off work on time for several days. As he exited the building, he spotted a petite figure sitting by a flower bed. Xia Chu Yi. Hearing his voice, Chu Yi jumped up excitedly and wrapped her arms around his. "Uncle, you're off work." Xiaoran felt a bit awkward as her enthusiasm caught him off guard, his pale cheeks flushing slightly. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," she said, pouting. "You got me fired, and now I can't even afford to eat. Isn't your dad feeding you?" Chu Yi shrugged with a smile. "I told you he abuses me. Why don't you believe me?" Xiaoran figured she was just joking and sighed helplessly. "Wait here, I'll get the car." He took her to a fish restaurant. The rich aroma filled the air, and Chu Yi, feeling starved, immediately reached for a piece of fish as soon as it arrived, only to be stopped by Xiaoran. "Be careful, there are a lot of bones." He expertly picked some fish out for her, carefully removing the bones before handing it over. "Here, it might still be hot. Eat slowly." Chu Yi watched him for a few seconds before bursting into laughter. "Uncle, you're so skilled at this. Do you do it for your girlfriend often? Don't talk nonsense, you little girl." Xiaoran gently tapped her forehead with his chopsticks. Chu Yi pouted and silently resumed eating. Just after they finished, Xiaoran received a call from his cousin, asking him to pick up some snacks on the way home. These young girls these days, he thought, rubbing his forehead in frustration. After a moment, he asked Chu Yi, "Do you know what girls like to eat?" Chu Yi didn't respond. They entered a snack shop where Chu Yi grabbed a basket and quickly filled it to the brim in just a few minutes. At the checkout, Xiaoran said, "Grab another basket just like that one." Chu Yi followed his instruction, and Xiaoran took the extra basket while adding a bag of mint candies before telling the cashier, "Please pack them separately." Xiaoran dropped Chu Yi off at her apartment complex. Before she got out, he handed her the bag of snacks with the added mint candies. "This is a little compensation for you losing your job." Chu Yi accepted it silently, warmth flooding her heart, making her chest feel tight. "Thank you." She opened the car door and walked to the driver's side, turning to him. "Uncle, what if I'm not Xia Chu Yi anymore? Would you like me? When I am no longer Xia Chu Yi, when I am clean and free, I will bravely love you." Xiaoran froze. But before he could respond, Chu Yi quickly leaned over and pecked him on the cheek before turning to leave. Xiaoran stood there, stunned, his cheeks burning. By the time he regained his composure, Chu Yi's figure had already faded into the distance. Under the dim streetlight, her shadow stretched long, giving off a lonely and desolate impression. Chu Yi seemed to enjoy waiting for Xiaoran after work every evening, and soon everyone at the station knew about it. Even the chief casually brought it up during a meeting one day, reminding Xiaoran not to let his romantic life interfere with work. Each time, Xiaoran would blush and smile helplessly. Chu Yi was a good girl, but she was still so young, no matter what. He wouldn't do anything with a minor. Besides, she always called him uncle. No matter how many times he corrected her, it didn't work. Thinking about it made Xiao Ren feel like he was already an old man at the ripe age of 25. On this day, Chu Yi was still waiting outside the police station. A few familiar officers greeted her as they left for the day. When Xiao Ren finally came out, he smiled at her. "Are you cold?" He noticed she wore long sleeves with her collar pulled up high. "Yes, I'm afraid of the cold." Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he sighed. "It's so hot today." "Uncle, tomorrow I'm turning 18. Xiao Ran, who was driving, turned back to her, seeing her head tilted with her bright, sparkling eyes. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. "Tomorrow is your birthday?" "Yes." "Uncle, since we're friends across ages now, you can't forget my birthday gift." When the light turned red, Xiao Ran stopped the car, sighing as he looked at her. "Am I really that old?" She had just called their friendship an age-crossed one, which felt a bit too much for him. "No, but don't you think uncle sounds cute?" Xiao Ran could only roll his eyes. Chu Yi laughed cheerfully. "Uncle, will you take me to the amusement park tomorrow? Consider it your birthday gift to me." Xiao Ren nodded. "Okay." The evening of her 18th birthday, Chu Yi ultimately did not get to celebrate. Xiao Ran finished work, holding a gift his cousin picked out for him. As he stepped out of the police building, he found no trace of the familiar figure by the flower bed. After searching around, he was puzzled when his phone rang. It was a call from Team Leader Lee. "Come back right away, we have a case." Xiao Ran heard hurried footsteps and the sound of sirens, distant and like echoes from another world. He raised his head in confusion to see Team Leader Lee striding out, a bag clattering to the ground with a loud bang. Inside the small apartment, a strong stench of smoke and alcohol mixed with the metallic tang of blood made him nauseous. Xiao Ran rushed in, and as soon as he entered, he saw Chen Rong lying in a pool of blood, his abdomen a chaotic mass of wounds, blood spilling all over the floor. In the corner, Chu Yi curled up against the wall, also covered in blood. Her dark blue chiffon dress was torn to shreds, barely covering her essential parts. Her exposed skin bore countless old and new scars, while her neck and collarbone were marked with bruises. Xiao Ran's breath caught in his throat, feeling as if all the blood had rushed back, causing a painful tightness in his chest. He took off his police uniform and draped it over her shoulders. "You. Chu Yi looked up at him, helpless, her eyes bloodshot. "Uncle." Her thoughts were jumbled, memories swirling chaotically. She only remembered that Chen Rong, drunk and deranged, had assaulted her. But today was her birthday. Uncle was supposed to take her to the amusement park. How could she face him with the scent of that man lingering on her? It felt so dirty. Then there was the explosion of blood. She had driven the knife deep into Chen Rong's body. Xia Ren quickly covered her eyes, unable to bear looking at those once pure eyes now tainted with horror. His throat felt tight, and he couldn't find his voice. He was no longer an ignorant boy. From the signs, he could piece together everything she had endured. His fingers clenched into fists as he remembered how Chu Yi had often joked with him, "He always bullies me." It was all true. Chu Yi killed a man on the very day she came of age, and the ugly scars she had concealed for so long were laid bare for all to see. It was not a complicated murder case, and it was resolved quickly. Chu Yi was sentenced to 3 years in prison for excessive self-defense. On the day of the trial, Chu Yi stood in the defendant's seat wearing a light yellow prison outfit. Though she looked somewhat haggard, she remained beautiful. The family of Chen Rong hurled insults, and no amount of police intervention could silence them. But Chu Yi continued to smile, relief washing over her as she glanced back at Xiao Ran. Though she had taken a life, she had no regrets. Her 4 years of hell ended the moment Chen Rong died. The only regret was that her secrets were exposed to the harsh light of day, and her damaged body now faced the pitying and judgmental gazes of everyone. The day Xiao Ran went to see Chu Yi, it rained. He used his connections to enter the prison directly. Chu-yi was sitting on a chair, waiting for him. Perhaps due to the lack of sunlight, her skin appeared even fairer. "Uncle." Hearing the door open, she smiled and called out. Xiao Ran felt something was different about her. She used to smile, but it felt more like a facade. Now she seemed like a real 18-year-old girl. He felt a bittersweet sense of comfort, but his heart ached. "Are you getting by? Is anyone bullying you?" He handed her a bag of mints, his voice hoarse. "I'm Uncle's friend. Who would dare bully me?" She stood up and pulled him down to sit, then unwrapped a candy and popped it in her mouth. After chatting for a while, she maintained her smile, but Xiao Ren felt an unusual heaviness in his heart, and his voice was almost gone. As he was leaving, Chu-yi suddenly hugged him tightly. "Uncle, next time you come to see me, bring me a white dress. I haven't worn anything white in years." She always felt dirty, so she never wore light colors. He replied softly, "Okay." The next day, he sent a dress into her. It was the gift he had originally intended for her birthday, one he and his cousin had spent hours selecting just the day before the incident. He never expected it would be delivered in such a manner. When the incident happened to Chu-yi, Xiao Ran was busy assisting the anti-trafficking unit in taking down a human trafficking den. Upon receiving the call, his face instantly turned pale. Amidst the bewildered stares of his colleagues, he rushed to his car and sped off. The journey from the outskirts to the prison wasn't long, yet he ran several red lights in a daze. In a room at the prison, a crowd had gathered, with forensic experts hurrying in. Xiao Ran's breath hitched as he pushed through the throng, only to be met with a horrific sight, a pool of blood. Chu-yi lay there, eyes closed and a faint smile on her beautiful face, dressed in a white lace gown, now stained crimson, resembling blooming blood flowers. A deep cut marked her wrist, the blood beginning to congeal. Beside her pillow lay several mint candy wrappers. Xiao Ran stood frozen, watching the forensic team at work, the guards coming and going, his mind a whirlwind of chaos. Memories flooded back. He recalled their first meeting, when she wore an adorable cat-eared hat, skillfully stealing snacks. He wondered what hardship could lead such a pretty girl to that desperate act. Although he disapproved, he still helped her. Their second encounter was in a bar. He was furious to see such a young girl working in such a place, leading him to say hurtful things, but she had replied nonchalantly. "No one is born a thief, nor does anyone willingly demean themselves." She had waited for him daily after work, her moods shifting from playful to angry to alluring, a whirlwind of emotions that left him overwhelmed. She was just a child. His cousin was the same age, cherished by everyone, while she suffered, losing everything under that man's torment, with no one to care for her or understand her. When she smiled and said, "He bullies me, doesn't feed me," was her heart not aching? Had she become numb to it all? She had long contemplated suicide. Perhaps the public revelation of her suffering was even more humiliating than Chunrong's abuse. Having lost everything, including her last shred of dignity, why couldn't she hold on a little longer? He had already contacted the best lawyer for her appeal. She was a victim, and the chance of a reduced sentence or probation was high. Why not just wait for him? He could handle the rumors. No one besides the officials involved would know her story. Why couldn't she just wait a bit longer? "Xiao Go, here's the victim's letter." A guard handed him an envelope. Xiao Ran snapped back to reality, his fingers trembling as he accepted it. The letter contained just 2 brief lines. "I came in innocent and wish to leave innocent. Xiao Ran, do you like me when I'm not Xia Chu-yi?" Xiao Ran abruptly covered his eyes, tears seeping between his fingers. "Yes." Years later, having become the captain of the Ningqing Criminal Police, Xiao Ran maintained some habits from years past, always carrying a few mints and paying particular attention to domestic violence cases. He often visited juvenile detention centers to support and counsel lost youth. Whenever a new officer joined, they would curiously ask about his habits, prompting older officers to shake their heads with a sigh, murmuring, "What a pity." As the years passed, many had forgotten about that young girl, and even Xiao Ran struggled to recall her face. The only lingering memory was that faint scent of mint. It was what she described as the smell of happiness.